My wife climbed out the window to meet her lover. She dreamed of starting a relationship with him, but the two of them had a bigger problem, Brittany, and I just told the truth. My story and the discovery of my wife's infidelity started in such an absurd way that I still find it hard to believe. Sometimes you expect signs, deep discussions, or changes in attitude, but mine started with something silly, an idiotic argument that wouldn't have gone further if it weren't for the fact that behind that fight, Miranda already had a well-hidden parallel life. That night, we fought over something trivial. I don't even remember exactly what the trigger was. I went to the living room to avoid continuing the discussion. She stayed in the bedroom, supposedly cooling down. It's important to clarify one thing. Our apartment is on the second floor, and to leave, you must pass through the living room. There is no other possible route, no alternative access, nothing. I stayed there on the sofa watching television. Miranda, meanwhile, locked herself in the bedroom, and I didn't hear another peep from her after a while. I thought she had gone to sleep. I had no intention of checking on her. Shortly after, at 10 p.m., the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered reluctantly, thinking it might be something work-related, a wrong number, anything. I never imagined that this call would completely dismantle my life. On the other end of the line, I heard a police officer's voice. Serious, direct, no beating around the bush. "Are you Miranda Fernandez's husband?" "Your wife was involved in a traffic accident. She's been taken to the hospital. She's stable, but you need to come." I went blank. I didn't react. I didn't process it. I just thought out loud, there must be a mistake. My wife is in the bedroom. The officer insisted. "No, sir. She has been identified. The ambulance picked her up less than half an hour ago." That sentence took my breath away. I suddenly stood up and went straight to the bedroom. I opened the door without thinking. The bed was made, with no sign of Miranda anywhere. And then everything suddenly made sense, but in the worst possible way. She had escaped through a window. It was the only option, because to leave the apartment, she would have had to pass through the living room right in front of me. I was there all night. I never saw her pass, never heard the door, nothing. She had left like a teenager sneaking out to meet someone she shouldn't. I felt anger, not just about the argument, but about the lie, the immaturity, the nerve. How the hell did she get down from the second floor? I have no idea, but she got down. And behind her disappearance was the answer I still didn't want to accept. Miranda had been seeing someone else for a long time. I drove to the hospital filled with a mix of fear and fury. Fear for what had happened to her, fury at how it happened. When I arrived, they took me to her room. Before I even saw her, I noticed a guy I didn't know sitting next to her, stroking her hand with an intimacy that isn't improvised. A slow, confident caress, one that someone had done before. My stomach churned. The guy saw me enter and pulled his hand away as if he'd been shocked. He adjusted himself in the chair, pretending to be a casual visitor, but his face betrayed nervousness, discomfort, and guilt. Miranda, more injured than him, had her neck immobilized and several bruises. As soon as she saw me, she started crying and begging for forgiveness. Hurried words, a mixture of guilt and fear. I didn't wait for apologies. I didn't want her version. I'd wanted nothing. I spoke directly with a voice trembling from contained rage. I wanted divorce. To my surprise, she didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't say she was confused or that she'd made a mistake. Instead, she looked at me with a defeated expression and said, "If it's for the best, fine. I love Rodrigo and I want to start over with him." The blow, a direct stab. The ironic thing is that when I turned to look at this Rodrigo, he didn't look like he wanted to start over. He didn't look like he was in love or even like a remorseful man. What he had was an expression of total discomfort, as if Miranda was saying something he didn't want me to hear, as if she had revealed a plan he had never truly accepted. That disgusted me, more than the betrayal itself. I took a deep breath and nodded. It wasn't worth yelling.
It wasn't worth destroying myself further for someone who had already decided to sink on their own. I warned her in the firmest voice possible. Don't think you're going to get off so easily. You are going to pay for your betrayal. Then I looked at Rodrigo. He couldn't even maintain eye contact, a coward even in this. And I said, and you're not getting out of this either. There are things you will have to answer for too. He swallowed hard and looked down at the floor. I left that room feeling the ground tremble beneath my feet, but also with a clarity I hadn't had for a long time. That woman didn't love me. That guy wasn't going to choose her, and I wasn't going to sink along with them. But inside me, the story was already written. Miranda would pay for what she did, and as for Rodrigo, before I laid a finger on him, before I sank him, I wanted to know who he truly was. Because if Miranda risked escaping from the second floor to see him, this guy must have something more, a life, a past, someone who certainly knew nothing about this. Before leaving the hospital, I asked for the visitor's details, Rodrigo's full name, his address, whatever they could give me. I didn't cause a scene, I didn't raise suspicion, no one saw malice in my face, only the betrayed husband trying to understand. The police and nurses only gave me general information, nothing very useful for locating Rodrigo precisely. So before leaving the hospital, I went back to find the officers who had responded to the accident. This time, instead of entering as an injured husband, I entered as someone who needed to understand the case, and it worked. First, I asked about the type of accident. They gave me the basic details: collision against a house, property damage, minor injuries in addition to Miranda, who came out with the worst of it. In the middle of the conversation, almost without meaning to, I mentioned that Miranda was my wife, and the man she was with was her lover.
I said that Tyler might have misunderstood her kindness as a sign that she was being forced to break up against her will. The following week, Tyler started showing up at Maria's office building during her lunch break, even on days when he didn't have any deliveries scheduled. Maria's colleagues started asking why the UPS driver kept lingering around the building looking for her. Her boss asked if there was an issue with the delivery service that needed to be resolved. Maria said she felt cornered. She said she couldn't tell her boss the real reason Tyler was bothering her without revealing our open marriage agreement. But she also couldn't ignore his behavior because it was affecting the work environment. She said she was thinking of asking to work from home more often to avoid seeing Tyler. Update 3. Everything came to a head in September when Tyler's behavior escalated beyond what either of us expected. Tyler had been showing up at Maria's work almost every day for 3 weeks. Her boss finally called the UPS company to complain about the driver's unprofessional behavior. The company transferred Tyler to a different route, but that only made things worse. Without the delivery job giving him access to Maria's building, Tyler started waiting for her in the parking garage where she kept her car. Maria would text me when she was leaving work so I would know her approximate arrival time. But several times she arrived much later than expected because Tyler cornered her and insisted on long conversations about their relationship. One evening in mid-September, Maria arrived home visibly shaken. She said Tyler had followed her car from work and was parked outside our house. She said when she got out of the car, Tyler approached her in our driveway and asked to come inside to talk to both of us together. Maria said Tyler believed that if he could speak to me directly, he could convince me that Maria really wanted to keep seeing him. She said Tyler had convinced himself that I was an abusive husband who controlled Maria and prevented her from making her own choices. I looked out the front window and saw Tyler sitting in his car across the street. I called the non-emergency police line and explained that we had someone who wouldn't stop bothering us. The officer who came over spoke to Tyler and told him he needed to leave our neighborhood and stop harassing us. But Tyler didn't stop. The following week, he started calling Maria's office phone multiple times a day. Her boss said that if the situation wasn't resolved quickly, she might need to consider looking for another job because Tyler's behavior was disrupting the entire office. Maria finally decided she had to tell her boss the truth about why Tyler was after her. She explained that she had become personally involved with Tyler and was now trying to end that relationship. Her boss was understanding, but said she couldn't let Maria's personal issues affect the work environment indefinitely. Meanwhile, Tyler also started calling our home phone. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize, but Tyler would leave long voicemails explaining why he thought Maria and I should get a divorce so she could be with him. Some of these messages were aggressive, others were pleading. All of them made it clear that Tyler didn't accept the fact that Maria had chosen to end things with him. In early October, Tyler showed up at my job. He asked the receptionist to speak with me, saying he had something important to discuss about a mutual friend. When I went to the lobby and saw Tyler, I told him to leave immediately. Tyler said he wouldn't leave until I admitted I was forcing Maria to stay away from him. Tyler's visit to my office was the final straw. I told my boss what was happening and asked for advice. My boss recommended that I seek legal counsel to see what options we had to make Tyler stop harassing us. The lawyer said we had enough documentation to request a restraining order against Tyler. Between the voicemails, the visits to both our workplaces, and the episode where he followed Maria home, there was a clear pattern of harassment that justified legal intervention. We filed for the restraining order in November. Tyler was officially served with the documents, ordering him to stay away from both of us, our house and our workplaces. The order also prohibited him from contacting us by phone, email, or any other means. But the damage to our marriage had already been done. Months of dealing with Tyler's harassment put an enormous strain on our relationship. Maria blamed herself for getting involved with him in the first place. I blamed myself for agreeing to the open marriage, even though I had serious reservations about it. We stopped talking about anything other than the practical aspects of dealing with Tyler's behavior. We no longer ate dinner together because we were too stressed to enjoy the food. We stopped making weekend plans because we never knew if Tyler would show up somewhere and ruin our day. By December, we were living like strangers who happened to share the same house. We weren't fighting, but we weren't connecting at all either. We would sit in the same room watching television without talking. We went to bed at different times and woke up at different times. On New Year's Eve, instead of celebrating together, Maria went to her sister's house and I stayed home alone. We had both been invited to the same party, but we agreed that we weren't ready to pretend everything was normal in front of our friends. That night I realized our marriage was over. The open marriage experience destroyed the trust and intimacy we had built over 6 years together. Even with Tyler finally out of the way, we couldn't find our way back to each other. Maria and I separated in January. She temporarily moved into her sister Jessica's house while we decided on the next steps. We told our families we were taking time apart to work on our relationship, but we both knew we were likely headed for divorce. We filed for divorce in March. The process was straightforward because we agreed on how to divide our assets, and neither of us wanted to fight over anything. We sold the house and split the money. We divided the furniture and household items without major arguments. The divorce was finalized in June. Maria found an apartment for herself on the other side of the city and got a new job at a different company. I moved into a smaller place closer to my office. Today, we no longer have any contact with each other. Looking back, I realized we were both naive about what an open marriage would actually entail. We thought we could control the emotions and complications that come with intimate relationships outside of marriage. We thought we could establish rules that would protect our core relationship while allowing us to explore attraction to other people. But we learned that some doors don't close once they're opened. We learned that bringing other people into our marriage changed us in ways we never imagined. And most importantly, we learned that some mistakes can't be undone even when both people want to fix what was broken. Neither of us has remarried. I don't know if Maria has dated anyone since the divorce. I've had a few dates, but nothing serious. I'm still not sure if I'm ready to trust my heart with anyone else again after everything that happened. The restraining order against Tyler is still in effect. As far as I know, he has complied with the order and stayed away from both of us. But this experience taught me how quickly someone you barely know can become a real threat to your safety and peace. I don't blame Maria for being attracted to Tyler or for wanting to explore that attraction. I blame both of us for believing we could handle an open marriage without destroying what we had built together. Reddit comment of the day: congrats to all involved. They turned a stable marriage into a social experiment sponsored by delusion and lack of foresight. The modern idea of the open marriage lasted just long enough to destroy trust, bring a stalker into the mix, and send everyone their separate ways. Moral of the story? Some doors you open thinking they're an adventure, and you find out they were the emergency exit from your own relationship.
The police report confirmed it too. The responsibility was virtually established. She was driving, lost control, and crashed into private property. It wasn't a complex case for the lawyers. While all this was progressing, I needed to know what was happening with Rodrigo. I wanted to see him fall. If Miranda had destroyed my marriage because of him, the least I could do was confirm that his life was also collapsing. Don't you think? I hired a private investigator, a guy who performed discreet surveillance and knew how to film without arousing suspicion. Yes, you might think these were extreme measures, but it was necessary. I wanted to know why that man was so terrified of his own girlfriend. Within a week, I had the report. Rodrigo leaving work, his girlfriend waiting for him outside, and a scene that made all the employees stare. She was shouting that she knew about the cheating. She said Miranda's name. It wasn't a vague insult. And at one point in the video, you can clearly see her grabbing him by the hair and pulling while he tried to get free. Security guards had to intervene to separate them. After that, he tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen. He didn't fight back, he didn't push her, and she left. The guards escorted him to his car. The investigator told me that when they got home, the curtains were immediately closed. He tried to listen, but apparently the apartment was soundproof. The investigator also told me he saw Rodrigo's face appear at the window as if someone were pressing his head, and then nothing. This explained why Rodrigo had disappeared off the map. Another interesting thing, I never heard from him in any of the accident hearings. He didn't show up to offer support, testimony, or anything. He had disappeared even from Miranda, and that said much more about him than any words. The divorce finally came through, and although at first everything seemed to lean in my favor, with a possible division of 75% of the assets for me, in the end, Miranda's acting finally worked. Her tears, her neck brace, her victim performance in court, all that theater resulted in a 50-50 division. It was frustrating, but I accepted it. It wasn't worth continuing to fight with lawyers over someone who no longer existed in my life. To close that chapter for good, we both decided to sell the house. The idea was simple. Each of us would take our half and go our separate ways. The big difference was that while I would actually see that money, Miranda wouldn't see a cent. Her accident hearings had already concluded, and the resolutions were clear. Fines, indemnities, and payments that she had to cover no matter the cost. Everything she was entitled to from the sale of the house would go directly to cover the damages she caused by driving her lover's car and crashing into a house. Basically, Miranda was left with zero. Meanwhile, I regained some of my financial stability. It wasn't an absolute victory, but it was the logical consequence of everything she had caused. As for Rodrigo, the last news I had came from the investigator. Apparently, he was still with his girlfriend, but the last time he saw him, the guy had visible scratches on his face and neck, long red marks as if he had been furiously clawed. I imagine that the girlfriend, the drama starter Brittany, hasn't let him breathe since everything came to light. I imagine his life is hell, and that doesn't surprise me. That guy didn't have the character to sustain anything. Not his lie, not his clandestine affair, nor the girlfriend he already had. But there was another detail, one that still makes me laugh when I remember it. Before Rodrigo crawled back to his girlfriend and his troubled relationship, Miranda acted as if nothing had happened. She walked around the house with her head held high, as if she hadn't escaped through a window to meet her lover, as if she hadn't destroyed a car, as if she hadn't crashed into someone else's property, as if she weren't neck-deep in debt. She even behaved as if I should feel ashamed of how everything ended. But that facade lasted very little. One afternoon, she returned to the apartment with her hair completely messed up and scratches on her arms, face, and neck. It was clear that something violent had happened. She avoided talking to me, locked herself in the room as if she didn't exist. I didn't ask anything because I wouldn't give her the pleasure of thinking I cared. If something had happened with Rodrigo's girlfriend, that was her problem, not mine. And yes, that was my conclusion. Brittany certainly paid her a visit too. Somehow the two of them met, a fury against a fury. Either Miranda had the audacity to seek out Rodrigo and the girlfriend marked her up from head to toe. It was the most obvious conclusion. Days passed like this, until at one point she broke the silence. We were reviewing the house sale documents when out of the blue I asked directly, "Are you and your lover still together?" She tensed up, took a deep breath, and replied with an arrogant tone, "I don't want to know anything more about him. I realized I am too much for a coward. I don't plan to stay with someone like that." I laughed. A sincere laugh burst out. I couldn't help it. And I said, "Of course, he dumped you, didn't he?" The irritation on her face was instantaneous. She stared at me angrily, but didn't say anything more. That reaction was enough for me to understand the truth. Rodrigo had ended things with her at some point during the process. Maybe when the girlfriend caused that scene at his work, or maybe when Miranda pressured him for a fresh start, or maybe when he realized that the relationship with her would only sink him further. The point is, he left her, and nothing hurt Miranda more than rejection. Afterwards, as we continued with the house sale paperwork, I noticed another pattern. Every time we had to meet with the real estate agent, Miranda would show up wearing clothes that, curiously, I had always said looked good on her. Specific blouses, flattering jeans, hairstyles she used when we were still a couple.
It was obvious that she wanted me to say something, to look at her, to react, to doubt the separation, but I never said anything. I didn't make a comment, neither positive nor negative. I didn't look at her for any longer than necessary, and when she understood that she no longer had a place in my life, she stopped trying. The last thing I heard about Miranda was through other people. We no longer had any reason to speak to each other. They told me she was working 2 jobs. The indemnities, the fines, and the deadlines imposed by the court were very strict. If she failed to meet the payments, she could face additional charges and, in the worst-case scenario, the risk of imprisonment for default. Literally, she was working to avoid going to jail, and that was the direct consequence of everything that began that morning when she decided to flee through the window as if she were 16. Every decision she made afterward only deepened her fall. Rodrigo was trapped in a toxic relationship. She was in debt, exhausted, and without support, and I was finally free. Miranda paid for every one of her decisions, not by my hands, not through direct revenge, but because life confronted her with what she herself had provoked. Rodrigo also faced the consequences. Everyone got what they deserved, and all I had to do was watch everything fall into place. I don't rejoice in their suffering, but I don't feel sorry for them either. The truth is simple. They chose this path. I just followed mine. Reddit comment of the day. And there you have it, guys. Long story short, Miranda jumped out the window to pursue a forbidden romance, but in the end, the only jump she made was straight into debt, 2 jobs, and almost jail time. As for Rodrigo, who was supposed to be the love of her life, he proved that his greatest talent was being a consolation prize in a toxic relationship with a vengeful Brittany. In the end, the only one who won was the OP, who didn't even have to get his hands dirty to see karma act faster than a YouTube editor with clickbait.